Now, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has met with Russian President Vladimir Putin as a possible arms deal is set to dominate the agenda. As observers remain cautious, North Korea had fired 2 ballistic missiles just ahead of the meeting. The two leaders have hailed their ties. As per the Russian state media, the North Korean leader has said the ties with Russia will be a #1 priority and that he will show his support in Putin's battle with the West. The duo met at Vostochny Cosmodrome in eastern Russia. The spaceport is now Russia's key space launch facility after coming into service in 2016. It is located some 900 miles north of Vladivostok. According to Russian news agencies, President Putin has announced that Moscow will help Pyongyang build satellites. The visuals on your screens show the two leaders inspecting the facilities at the spaceport.
Она висит. Вот она висит. Вот это называется верхний силовой. Она в сложенном виде находится.
Meanwhile, South Korean military and Japanese Coast Guard, they've confirmed that North Korea fired 2 ballistic missiles towards the Sea of Japan. The missiles fell out of Japan's exclusive economic zone. No further details such as the missile size or range have been released yet. Now, the launch, it came just hours before the closely watched Kim-Putin summit. As per North Korean state media, Kim Jong-un has described his visit to Russia as a clear show of strategic importance, while Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson called it important amid the geopolitical challenges. This is Kim Jong-un's second known visit to Russia and his first trip abroad since the COVID pandemic. Western nations as well as Ukraine expressed concerns over a possible arms deal between the two nations. UN Security Council members as well traded barbs on the issue on Tuesday.
We will continue to identify, expose, and counter Russia's attempts to acquire military equipment from the DPRK or any other state that is prepared to support Russia's war against Ukraine. We urge the DPRK to cease its efforts to transfer arms to Russia. We also urge all member states to remind Russia of its Security Council obligations, remind Russia that any transfer of arms between the two countries would violate UN arms embargo on the DPRK that Russia itself has voted to adopt.
It appears that Moscow is attempting to seek foreign sources to replenish its military arsenals. We closely follow the current contacts between Russia and North Korea, which may focus, as reported, on the supply of North Korean weapons and munitions to Russia for the purpose of intensifying its war against Ukraine. We underline that if this is the case, this will constitute another grave violation by Russia of the Security Council decisions, as it has already happened with the supplies of military UAVs to Russia by Iran.
Analysts say North Korea has huge supplies of artillery shells, rockets and small arms ammunition, and this is what Putin seeks to gain from this meeting. These arms could help Russia replenish the vast stocks that it has used up in more than 18 months of the war in Ukraine. Workers may also be something in Russia's interest and amid record low unemployment. And in return, Russia could offer grain and oil to North Korea as the country faces food shortage amid heavy sanctions. Russia could also offer military technology as Kim Jong-un looks to develop nuclear capabilities. For more on this, we're now being joined by Scott Lucas, live from Birmingham, a professor for international politics at the University College Dublin. Thank you so much for joining us on the show, sir.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So my first question to you, there's a lot's been said about an imminent arms deal between Russia and North Korea. What do you reckon both nations stand to gain from this meet, with Kim Jong-un even saying that this meeting is a stepping stone for stronger ties? North Korea will always be with Russia and that ties with Russia remain a #1 priority.
First of all, neither Vladimir Putin nor Kim Jong-un will refer to military supplies in the photo opportunity that they're having today in the far east of Russia. They will both talk about a joint stand against imperialism. They'll talk about ties. They won't even talk about Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. What will happen behind the scenes, however, is a different matter. Most countries, the intelligence agencies of most countries, believe that Russia will be seeking military supplies from North Korea. These artillery shells that you talked about, other munitions, given that Russia has depleted stocks, given that it is in trouble in Ukraine. Not just that it has failed to overrun Ukraine, but that it faces a Ukrainian counteroffensive. Most analysts believe that, as you mentioned, North Korea will seek grain and energy supplies from Russia and maybe even nuclear technology. And of course, that type of deal behind closed doors would be a violation of the UN resolution that says that there are no arms that go out or into North Korea because of its nuclear weapons program and because of other violations. But as I said, Vladimir Putin is isolated. He is isolated not only by the West, but countries like India, China, and Saudi Arabia are distancing themselves from the invasion of Ukraine. So he's got to turn to someone, and it just happens to be Kim.
Well, as per South Korean military, North Korea also fired 2 ballistic missiles towards the Sea of Japan. What's your assessment of the simmering tensions in the Korean Peninsula and North Korea's posturing here? What sort of a message does this send out?
This is just a bit of chest thumping by North Korea, which happens to be timed for Kim's visit to Russia. Look at us, look how tough we are, look at the missiles that we've got. South Korea immediately takes note of it. So will Japan, so will other Asian countries. At this point, treated as just a bit of posturing by North Korea. We're not talking about North Korea launching military operations. It is all an effort by both Kim and by Putin to say, hey, look at us. We're really, really strong, even if Putin happens to be weak in Ukraine and on shaky ground inside Russia, and even if Kim is weak inside North Korea, where there's a question of keeping enough food on the table, keeping enough oil for his people to survive, let alone what he can do with his military weapons.
All right. So that being said, of course, as you mentioned as well, Western nations are cautiously tracking this meet as well. UN Security Council members have voiced their concerns. How do you see the relationship between the two evolving, and what sort of an impact do you think this will have on the war in Ukraine and also the international realm?
Well, I think on the military front that even if Russia can get these artillery pieces and munitions from North Korea, it just simply tries to hold the line. I don't actually think it turns the tide on the battlefield. And indeed, although it is a gradual process, let's be very clear here, Ukraine is advancing. Ukraine is liberating its territory. But Russia needs to slow down that counteroffensive, probably as it tries over the winter to use its missiles and to use its drones to hit Ukraine's energy infrastructure. In terms of what North Korea gains from this, they get a bit of legitimacy. I mean, look, let's be honest here. North Korea is even more isolated than Russia. Very few countries will deal with the North Koreans. That's why they have so many problems in terms of their domestic situation. But now Kim gets to say, look, I'm partnered up with one of the largest countries in the world. It might not do much for his international position, but it does play well in propaganda back home. But I have to emphasize, I'm actually looking at what other countries do. So how does India, which is very, very concerned about an escalation, not just in Ukraine, but an escalation in Asia, how does India respond to Russia and North Korea making these military partnerships and these links? How does China respond? In other words, how do other countries respond to try to say, look, stability matters more, matters more than Moscow or than Pyongyang at this point?
All right. Well, Professor Lucas, thank you so much for joining us on WION with all your insights on this.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.